Hey, I wanted to give you a recap of this morning's 12th grade boys Sunday school lesson, our community group. And so we're in Judges 13, 1 through 5, and 14, 8 through 9, and then Judges 16, 21 through 22, and 26 through 30. And this is the story of Samson, and his parents were given are told to set Samson apart for service to God, the Nazarite vow, where he was not supposed to cut his hair, and so following that vow and that commitment, God would see that and then give him strength, and so this was the backdrop to our discussion this morning, and so we went into a little detail about the story, a little more than what I just did with you. But here are some of the things that we talked about, and I wanted to bring them to your attention and just let you think about them. So in Judges 13, 1 through 5, it says, the Israelites, again, did what was evil in the Lord's sight. And so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man from Zorah, from the family of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was unable to conceive, and they had no children. Verse 3, so the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, although you are unable to conceive and you have no children, you will conceive and give birth to a son. Verse 4, now please be careful to do not to drink wine or beer, or to eat anything that's unclean, for indeed you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you must never cut his hair, because the boy will be a Nazarite to God, a Nazarite to God from birth, and he will begin to save Israel from the power of the Philistines. So you follow that down, and then there in Judges 14 and verse 9, I want to read that. So Samson is walking along. He scoops some honey into his hands, and he ate it, and he went along. And then when he came to his father's and his mother's home, he gave some to them, and they ate it, but he did not tell them that it had been scooped from a lion's carcass, from a dead animal. Of course, that's one of the things you weren't supposed to do. You weren't supposed to touch a dead animal. And then down in verse 20, if not it's one of the saddest verses in the Bible. It says that Samson did not know that the Lord had left him. And so he began to let Delilah flirt with him. He flirted with Delilah, and finally he fell asleep. She had his hair cut. He lost his strength. And so in this, we see this progression of playing with sin, of excusing sin, of justifying feelings, and moving away from God. And that's where we all are. That's where all of us are. Making sure that we have a clear conscience, that we're not making ourselves out to be something that we're not, playing with sin. And so this is the backdrop for the conversation that we had this morning, and I want to share some things with you that I saw in the text this morning. So verse 1, so Judges 13 and verse 1 says, then the Israelites again did what was evil in the Lord's sight. And so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines. So consider that the word again. It says again, the Israelites again. And we know that there is a pattern of them loving God, rejecting God, walking away from God, and then they ask for forgiveness, and then God forgives, and then they are restored, and then they walk with God, and then they sin again, and then they reject God and walk away from God, and then they suffer for it, and they ask God for forgiveness, and then he forgives them, and they're restored, and then they sin again, and there's this cycle that goes on and on and on, and so rather where it says the Philistines again did what was evil in the Lord's sight, I marked through the word Philistines, and I wrote or I wrote through the word Israelites in verse 1, and I wrote Brad. And Brad again did what was evil in the Lord's sight. This is the dilemma that everybody who follows Jesus finds himself. They know they're not supposed to do certain things or think certain things or say certain things, and when that does happen, there's this amazing amount of guilt that weighs us down. And so, how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that you say you love God, but yet you don't do what you want to do and what you think is expected of you? And Paul had the same problem. He said, the good that I want to do, I don't do, but in fact, the very evil that I hate, that's what I do. So I think the best question to ask at this time and over this topic is, do you make are you making yourself out to be something that you're not? Do you have a healthy, ongoing discipleship relationship and community that you can be in and have healthy conversations? And in that ongoing healthy discipleship relationship, is there a wall of trust so that you can be honest and transparent and say, this is what I'm wrestling with, and all of this is because I'm moving forward. All of this is because I want to continue to grow. All of this is because I continue to want to follow Jesus and live a holy life, a life that actually reflects Scripture and actually reflects our calling. And so that's why Paul said, I press on for the high calling. It's not a sinful calling. It's not a calling where we justify and excuse and make up reasons why it's okay to do what we want to do, our sin of choice. It's a high calling. And so are we surrounding ourselves with men who are going to hold us to that, to encourage us along the way, not to quit, not to give up. You fall down 6 times and you get up 7. Do we have those kind of relationships? And so, the question, one of the questions that we want to ask ourselves is, am I becoming the kind of believer who's going to continue to make excuses so that I can ease my conscience, right? Well, boys will be boys. That's what we say. And everybody's doing it. There's a bunch of excuses that we like to use. Boys will be boys. Everybody's doing it. It's just a little white sin, a little white lie. God understands. These are all the things that we tell ourselves. And these are all the things that we need to run from so that we do have a clear conscience. And so I think another way to be thinking when we realize our own sin, we're becoming and are aware of the depth of our own sin, is rather than say, Lord, I thank you that I'm not like them, and then begin to compare ourselves with somebody else. Rather, we begin to say, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. See, that's a good place to find yourself, where you have sinned, you have been apathetic or indifferent, and rather than be prideful and say, boy, I'm glad I'm not like them, we say, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. And that's the kind of, I think that's near to what and why the scripture says of David that he was a man after the heart of God, because he wasn't making himself out to be something that he wasn't. He wasn't being fake. He wasn't practicing, continuing to sin on purpose so that he could get more grace. I mean, there's a real reason, compelling evidence to argue that if that's where you are, if you're making excuses for your sin just so you can get more grace, you probably don't have a relationship with God. So that's a pretty serious thing, pretty serious place to find yourself. So I hope this is encouraging to you. I hope you're going to be able to look inside, ask God to give you a clean heart, like Psalm 51 says, and hope this will be an encouragement to you in your own walk with God, but also in your pouring into other men and helping them become mature in their thinking and in their walk with the Lord.